Afternoon. Welcome to the BACP Business Education Workshop webinar series. We have adapted our regular business education workshops at City Hall into these webinars until further notice. I want to inform you that business licenses can be processed online by visiting chicagobusinessdirect.org. All BACP offices are open to the public. Please be advised that masks are required in all BACP facilities and 6 feet of social distancing must be maintained at all times. If you are a part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, you can get credit for joining this webinar by sending an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. I will put this email in the chat. If you want to learn more about the program, please visit chicago.gov/business education. Also, you can receive targeted emergency alerts for the business community by opting into Biz Emergency Alerts. If you are interested, please visit chicago.gov/Biz Alerts. We would like to encourage all attendees to ask questions. Please use the chat box and send your questions to all panelists. There will be a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. Today's webinar is entitled Emergency Grants and Loans for Small Businesses, presented by Allies for Community Businesses. At this time, I will now turn this webinar over to Brad McConnell for us to begin.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go through a presentation which should take approximately 10 to 15 minutes, which I'm sharing now, and will very quickly get us to the Q&A so that our friends from BACP can take your questions you put into the chat and into the Q&A stream and pose them to me so I can get as many answers as I possibly can. So first, I'll just introduce our organization, Allies for Community Business. We are a nonprofit that's based on the west side of Chicago, at the corner of Lake and Kedzie in East Garfield Park at the Hatchery, which is both our home and the largest nonprofit food and beverage incubator in the country, which we co-own and co-run. Our vision is that entrepreneurs from any background can start and grow businesses that create true generational wealth for the families and communities. The mission that we further is to provide the capital and the coaching and the collaboration that entrepreneurs need to grow great businesses in their communities. So we do that, all three of those things, the capital and the coaching and the collaboration together. And the focus today is going to be largely on the capital that we provide, although I will, throughout all of this, talk about the free coaching one-on-one that we provide alongside capital. So in normal times, when we're not in a pandemic, most of the capital we provide is in the form of loans, which are between $500 and $100,000. I'm going to come back to that at the end. But during the pandemic, we've spent most of our time focusing on the provision of grants. Obviously, grants are better than loans. It's free. You don't have to repay them. It's just a matter of getting the scarce dollars that are available into the hands of the business owners that need those grants the most. So last year, we provided approximately $400 million to small business owners, most of which went to the businesses that we really focus on throughout the state of Illinois, and in particular the south and west sides of Chicago, which are Black, Latinx, female, low-income entrepreneurs, those that have been traditionally underserved by mainstream financial services. And so just last Wednesday, a week ago, we started on the latest large grant program that we're working with in partnership with the state of Illinois, and that's called Back to Business. So we're going to spend most of our time today talking about the Back to Business grants, which are available right now. And so the agenda here for us is to talk about, for this program, funds that are available, the eligibility criteria we're going to be using, how we're prioritizing the applications we receive, what to expect if you get into the application, and then what assistance is available to you. So we'll walk through each one of these in turn. I'm then going to toggle over really quickly to the application itself, just to give you a flavor for what you will experience if you decide to apply, and we certainly encourage you to do so. And then we'll come back and talk about loans, and then stop. And then from there, we'll go through all of your questions. So let's talk mostly then about Back to Business, starting with the funding that's available. So Back to Business will disperse as the fiscal agent for the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity for the state, $250 million. And at a minimum, that $250 million is going to be distributed in the following priority areas, which includes at least $100 million for businesses that are located in what the state characterizes as disproportionately impacted areas. There's a map of those 176 zip codes on the landing page, which I'll show you in just a little bit, to go to for this program. At least $30 million will go the businesses that were eligible for the shuttered venue operation grant, but just couldn't access that money because it wasn't available in enough volume from the federal government. Same again, $25 million for the restaurants and taverns that didn't receive a restaurant revitalization fund grant. Again, that's another federal grant that didn't have nearly enough money. At least 25 million will go to hotels, and at least 25 million will go to businesses that applied for last year's business interruption grant, but because there wasn't enough money in that program either, weren't able to receive those funds. So those are the minimums that we'll be seeking to hit, and we'll do better than that in each category, I think, throughout the rest of the program. For any individual business, you will receive somewhere between $5,000 and $150,000. There's a higher amount for hotels. And the idea here is that the program is structured to cover 2 months of losses. So here's how we're going to calculate that. We're going to check your revenues from 2019 and your revenues from 2020. And we're going to look at your tax returns from 2018 and 2020 in order to do so. We're going to look at the difference between what you earned in 2019 and what you earned less in 2020. And then we're going to round up to the nearest $5,000, and then we're going to divide that by 6 in order to estimate not 12 months of losses, but rather 2 months of losses. So that's how the math's going to work. I should just reiterate that all of this information is provided on the Back to Business landing page. Everything I'm going to go through here, which you can reach at illinois.gov/DCEO. And there's a particular box that takes you to Back to Business from there, but I'll show you that link on screen in just a bit. So further, let's talk about who's eligible. Any independently owned and operated, either for-profit or nonprofit, that was in operation at least December 2019, so that we can make a 2019 to 2020 comparison, which is part of the federal funds we're using here and the requirements that the American Recovery Plan requires us to follow. There's a cap of $20 million in revenue in 2019 to be eligible. You have at least a $5,000 loss between 2019 and 2020 to be eligible, and need to follow all the rules through the social distancing directives received from all the levels of government and being an eligible industry. The priorities, again, that was eligibility. Now let's talk about who's at the top of the priority list. There's 4 criteria here that we're looking to prioritize. It's those who are in hard hit industries. I'll talk about exactly those in just a minute. Those 176 zip codes that I mentioned before, so it's where your business is located. It's where to be prioritized on this basis. If you've not qualified for any of the federal funds or state funds that were provided on an emergency basis last year, that will make you a higher priority. And if you're a smaller organization, meaning less than 5 million in revenue in 2019, you'll also be a priority. So these are the applications we're going to take and evaluate first. But remember, this is not the same thing as whether you're eligible, because any business who's in an eligible industry in the state of Illinois who made less than $20 million is eligible. These are just the businesses we're going to put to the top of the queue to evaluate first and fastest. So this is that list of the hard hit industries that we're looking for in order to process your applications first as they come in. And again, all of these industries are listed very carefully on the landing page where all this information resides on the DCEO page, which again, I'll show you the link to in just a little bit. So when you're going to apply, here are the things that you should expect to need to provide us. So there's really 6 sections here. There's the background questions about you as the business owner. Then there's questions about, as background, your business. Third, there's questions just about your business operations to allow us to get into all those priority categorizations and sorting and filtering and such. We then will quickly ask you just for the handles that you prefer for us to help promote your business as you choose to do so or not. That's purely optional. And then finally, the last 2 are for those folks who are in fact going to be awarded a grant. We need to know the information that we will then need to provide to you in the form of a W-9 tax form to reflect this income. So we'll fill that tax form out for you based on the information you provide there. And then finally, you need to attest to all of the requirements that the program has. That's just the nature of getting money from the federal or state or local government. So those are the 6 sections of the application. I'm going to just highlight the documents that you need to upload here, because this is usually the most painful part, and then we'll take a peek at what the application looks like, just so you know sort of the look and feel of that. So the documents that we require are the following. You need to have some verification of who you are. So a bunch of options there, but the driver's license, passport, and such, your ID of the business owner. We then need a bank statement between April and December 2020, just to substantiate that you were in business during the pandemic. And then also your most recent bank statement to give us further substantiation that you're still in business. We then will do all the math that I suggested before, based on the 2019 and the 2020 federal tax returns that you have. Whatever it is that you filed for your business, that's what you should upload when prompted to do so. And we totally recognize that depending on the structure of your business, whether you're for-profit or nonprofit, and if you are a for-profit, whether you're a corporation or an LLC or sole proprietorship, whatever it might be, the tax documents are going to be different. Whatever you filed federally, that's what you share with us, and then we'll deal with it. Finally, this is optional and probably fairly rare, but if none of the above reflected your business address, we obviously need to know where your business is to verify that you're eligible. So we'll need some additional document like a utility bill or something that includes your business address on it, but I suspect most people will have to upload that. Okay, so before we get to all of the assistance that's available, I'm going to toggle over really quickly just to show the look and feel of the application so that you just have a feel for that. So when you link in to start your application, this is what you should expect. You're going to first be prompted to create an ID and password. And when you create that ID and password, oh, I forgot to switch this, sorry. Wait for one moment. You're still looking at PowerPoint. I'm now going to have you be looking at this. There we go. So the first thing that you're going to be shown when you click over to start the application is just prompting to create an ID and a password. That then will allow you to come back at any time and fill out the rest of an application that you didn't complete in the first sitting. And you can also come back at any time later and see if your application has been evaluated yet, and if so, what status it has moved into. So that'll be first, just ID and password, which you'll create as a matter of signing up. Then the first screen you will see is this, where, again, of the 6 things that I was talking about before, you can see them all listed here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's kind of your menu of sorts. The first thing you'll do is just explain some information about yourself. So you'll give us your first name, last name. You'll specify, first of all, I suppose I should mention, which language you'd like to fill out the application in. And there are lots of choices here, English, Spanish, and 4 others. Then your email address, your title, your social security number, or your ITIN number, either one is fine. You'll see that this is just dummy data that I've pre-populated in here, so you don't have to sit there and watch me type. The address of the business owner, distinct from the address of the business. We'll get to that in a minute. And then the legal name of the business, your EIN, or if you don't have an EIN, your social security number or ITIN. But this is the unique identifier for your business that we're looking for. Then we try to figure out, for demographic reporting purposes, some questions about how you identify. All of these are optional. You have to fill this out, but there's a prefer not to respond to each one of these cases. And then you move to the next screen, which is now more about your business instead of the business owner. So here, we're asking for the business address, the structure of your business. And again, there's a number of different options here, whether it's sole proprietorship or nonprofit in certain cases. You then need to attest that you're not in any of the ineligible businesses. I mentioned that before, that there's a number of businesses that are ineligible, like, for example, gambling, lobbying, stuff like that. It's the standard list, really, that if you've ever applied for any governmental financing that you will see. And then you'll be asked to be more specific about the type of industry that you're in, so that we can figure out whether in one of those priority industries that we were talking about before, which is really important for us to figure out how to make sure that the money gets to those who've been hardest hit, and we're structuring the application reviews in that manner. We then ask the question, as I mentioned before, about did you receive a business interruption grant last year? Did you receive any of these other types of assistance? This is all in service of us being able to prioritize those who didn't get any assistance yet, so we can focus on those folks first, and then immediately move to those who did receive some assistance right after that. We then ask questions about your operations, and we need to know just what year and month. This is important here because if you started your business in 2019, but it was, say, in March or in June, that would tell us that when we look at your tax return, you don't have 12 months of revenue in there, right? Well, we're going to annualize whatever revenue you do have based on how long you were in operation, so that we have a fair picture then of the difference between 2019 and a full year of operations in 2020. We don't want to penalize you for starting somewhere in the middle of 2019, although you do have to at least have started in 2019 to have a filing with the IRS for us to make you eligible for the program. We then ask those top line receipts numbers that are in your tax return, so we can verify that for you. And then we get to asking you about which organization helped you. I'm going to come back to that assistance point in just a moment, but there's a drop down here list of a lot of organizations which are available to help as community navigators. So hold that thought just for 1 minute. We then get to the required documents, and I already went through all those before, but when you're prompted here, you just choose a file and tell us which document that you'd like to upload, and then you can do so in each one of these categories. Again, your ID, old business bank statement, current business bank statement, 2019 federal tax return, 2020 federal tax return. If there's anything weird about any of that you just want the reviewer of your application to know about, there's a free text box here for you to just describe to us what it is that we should expect to see. So therefore, it's just sort of a quicker step for you to give us information that helps us understand your application. It's purely optional if you want to fill out that text box. And then the final two things, then there's an opportunity, totally optional, for you to tell us what your website is, your Facebook handle, so that then if you're a grant winner, we can help to promote your business, draw more traffic to your site so you can sell more stuff. Then we get to those final two pages that I mentioned before, in which first we're just asking information to form fill into the tax form we need to provide you, because if you receive a grant, it's income, which you need to report to the IRS next year. So these are just the fields that we need to take from you in order to then give it back to you filled out. And then finally, there's an attestation page, which just asks you to say, is all this stuff true? And that's it. It's the hit complete. And then you'll, from that point forward, have this screen available to you, and you'll have a priority number associated with that. And so again, this is a dummy application, but you'll know from here for your real application, are you at 100%? And if so, where are you in the kind of 32 row categorizations that we're using to figure out who to work with first? So that's the application. Let me then finally go back to that list of assistants that I talked about briefly. So if you need assistance, there's a long list of organizations that have been dubbed community navigators, which will help you throughout the application process. So this is a list of all of what's called hubs. So these are organizations that have contracted directly with the state of Illinois in order to provide you with assistance. Underneath these hubs, there's approximately 100 organizations beyond this who are also providing assistance. They're characterized as spokes, but all together, all those organizations are here to help. And so there's a full list of all of these on the landing page for the program. If you have any help, need any help whatsoever, on top of all of that, you can always come directly to us at Allies for Community Business in order to get your individual questions answered. We have a help desk that's manned by a handful of folks who will give you 1 business day turnaround on all of your questions, whether you email us or call us, and just use help@a4c.org in order to get assistance that way. And I'll show you all that in just a minute. So here's the link. It's a really, really long URL to type into a browser that you see here. So I'd skip that, frankly, and instead just do illinois.gov/DCEO, and then there's a big box that says back to business. Click on that. That then takes you to this landing page where I've just cribbed the very top of it. And it's got all the information that you need about the program, the eligibility, basically everything that I've walked through here is all available there, as is a link directly to the application so you can get started. It says this huge blue box, apply. So use that in order to get moving. So finally, before we break and then go to questions, I just want to spend 1 minute on, beyond all of the grants, the loans that Allies for Community Business is also providing in parallel. So you can apply for both at the same time if you need both, or you can wait to see if you receive a grant successfully and then determine whether you want to take on debt or not. Totally up to you, but you're welcome at any time to work with us to go through our lending process, which you can access at a4cb.org/loans. But our loans are between $500 and $100,000. We don't use credit scores, or we don't value your personal assets in the way that most lenders do. So it's different. And the way that we underwrite is different. All this is laid out word for word on a4cb.org on exactly, I mean, every word of our credit policy is laid out one step after another. So I think typically we're going to be able to process a loan in about a week, because usually we have extra questions we need to ask. But if all the boxes are checked, you can get in and out really quickly in as little as a day. Importantly, for the rest of 2021, all of our loans are going to be at 3% interest. Between $500 and $100,000, doesn't matter how risky you are, doesn't matter any of that. If you qualify for a loan from us, it's 3% interest, 1% closing fees, that's it. So that's different than usual for us. Our rates are usually higher than that. But we just understand that, look, the recovery is tough. And if folks are coming to us for capital, then we need to be responsive to that throughout the end of 2021 at this very, very, very low rate. Usually it's a 2-year term, but we can adjust depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish. So we invite you to just talk to our folks and learn more about what we're trying to accomplish here with you. So finally, here's how to reach us. a4cb.org has all of this. Apply for a grant at cb.org/grants. That's also a place to get to the Back to Business grant, by the way. That's probably even easier than going to the long URL that I showed before, where is the Back to Business landing page. Again, to apply for a loan, a4cb.org/loans. Any free coaching that you're interested in, you can schedule it directly onto the calendar of one of the members of our team by going to a4cb.org/schedule. You just look at your own calendar and look at the availabilities and pick a spot, and it's yours. And that's a free 30-minute discussion to get started with our coaching. And then you can book any additional amount that you'd like that's valuable to you. Again, all of that is for free. So I'm going to stop there, and let's move to questions so I can make sure that we spend this time in the way that's most advantageous for you. So for our friends at BACP, do you have any questions that I should address first? All right, I'm going to go to the chat and see if I see any questions. So if Asif asks, if I received PPP, do we qualify? Yes, you do. So again, there's a difference between eligibility and priority, and it's kind of confusing. So I want to make sure that I really hammer this. Anybody who has successfully received any assistance at all, Paycheck Protection Program loans or grants or whatever it might be, you are absolutely eligible to apply for Back to Business. Those who received no assistance in the past since the pandemic began will be at a higher priority for the purposes of getting through the applications and making grant payments. But you're still eligible. And further, if you received a PPP, but that was not forgiven, so it's a loan instead of a forgiven grant, essentially, then in that case, you're going to be as though you didn't receive any emergency federal assistance in the first place. So that's a slight nuance just with PPP because it's forgivable, but just know that you're going to be eligible anyway. Okay, so I'm going to check the Q&A. But I'd be correct assuming that if I qualify for the EDL, qualify for this as well, possibly. So I think the criteria for an emergency injury disaster loan through the SBA is different than the criteria that we're using here for Back to Business. However, I think it's true to say that you should absolutely apply. And this program is for those who are brick and mortar and not. It's totally up to you. Sylvia asks if I have tax transcripts, is that the same thing? So we need to make sure that we can see the return, because we're taking the line 1A, depending line 7A, just depends on what type of form you file, depending on what type of structure you have for your business. So we want you to file your tax returns as filed, not the transcripts that you got back from the IRS, in order for us to be able to evaluate your application. Next question is the application on the Allies site or illinois.gov? It's both. So you can go to, there's a number of places to get to it, frankly, but a4cb.org/grants will get you there. illinois.gov/DCEO will get you there. So no problem there. Will this cover a new business also? No. So this is particularly directed towards businesses that started in 2019 or before. And that's just based on the requirements that the federal government imposed on us using these funds through the American Rescue Plan Act. How long will it take for grants to be awarded? Good question. So we're going to be reviewing the applications that we receive on a rolling basis. And what we're not going to do is just take thousands and thousands of applications and then provide all the funding at the end. Times are way too urgent. Businesses need capital to keep going or to restart if you've been closed for a period of time. And so we want to get the money out the door quickly. So our expectation is that we're going to start making disbursements of grants as early as 3 weeks from now in the middle of September. The ending of the application window is October 13th. And so we're going to start funding even while the application window is still open for new applicants. We expect to get all of the funding out on or about the end of October. And so it's a rolling basis, always looking to get the priority applications evaluated first and funded first. But that's the logic we're going to be running. I'm a new business, no record. So again, need to make sure that you have 2019 and 2020 taxes in order for us to substantiate they're eligible for the federal funds. Can funds be used to purchase business vehicles? So use of funds. This is really different than most of the other processes that you may have seen if you applied for other grants or emergency help. Unlike previous programs, there's very little specificity on how you must use the funds if you receive a grant through the Back to Business program. You have to use them for business expenses, but other than that, you can use them as you wish, which is much more attractive than some of the other more constrained programs that we've operated before in partnership with the state, with the county, with the city, and many, many others. So that's good news, I think, on that front. I received PPP funding in the first round, but not the second. You absolutely should put in an application because you are eligible. The priority that will grab your application to review is going to be dependent upon whether that first PPP loan was forgiven or not. But in any case, you're still eligible, and therefore I highly encourage you to apply. So can you talk about the list of zip codes in highly impacted areas again? So the idea here is that there are 176 zip codes the state has identified throughout Illinois that are disproportionately impacted areas, DIAs. And so there's a map on that landing page for the Back to Business program on DCEO's site where all of the links that I show, they all kind of route you directly to the Back to Business homepage. That map specifies all of those 176 zip codes visually on the state of Illinois map. So you can see them there. Again, remember, you're eligible regardless of where your business is located, so long as it's located in Illinois. You're going to be prioritized if you're in one of those 176 zip codes first, but then we'll get to the other applications thereafter. If the business is closed due to COVID, can you apply to reopen? So there's a little bit of nuance here. If you close your business because of all of the things that we've all been dealing with, but you had every intention to reopen your business and therefore have not done anything towards dissolution of your business, you're absolutely eligible. If you close your business and dissolved your business and therefore there is no legal entity any longer, then you're not eligible to go off and start a new business because we need to be serving businesses that are seeking to reopen, not open newly. And that's, again, just the federal requirements we're operating under. So I hope that distinction makes sense. Next question is there any type of assistance for businesses started in 2020? So as far as grants are concerned, I'm not aware of any immediate grants that are open right now for 2020 started businesses. Low-cost loans, yes. And on top of that, we're always posting on a4cb.org/grants opportunities that come up all the time for new grants that have different criteria that are organized in different ways. So I sort of keep up to date on that. And our newsletter is always going to highlight that too. You can sign up for our newsletter at a4cb.org down on the bottom. So there will be grant opportunities, I suspect, and there are loan opportunities now for businesses that have started in 2020 or 2021. Next question is, what if your 2019 tax return was in the negative, but your 2020 was positive? So in that case, I don't think you'd have an opportunity to show that you lost at least $5,000 due to COVID, because in fact you had more revenue in 2020 than you did in 2019. There's some extenuating circumstances to that. Remember, there's that text box, free text box, that is the bottom of the page of the application in which you're doing your uploading of your documents. You can articulate that strange circumstance there if you'd like, but we need to have some proof that you lost at least $5,000 between 19 and 20 in order to be eligible. Next, there are, independent contractors qualify. If you're structured as a sole proprietor, then yes. If you're an independent contractor, it's going to be completely dependent upon how you filed your business taxes. In other words, how that business revenue is reflected on your 2018 and your 2020 tax returns. So we'll look at those as on a case-by-case basis, but we need to see evidence that is a business and not just personal income. Next. Two questions here. Is the ITIN number the same as the tax number submitted in the taxes? And then secondly, the space where they're supposed to enter personal security number or ITIN breaks the space rather than ITIN doesn't matter. Okay, so your ITIN number is very, very likely what you used to file your taxes if that's how you operate as a business owner. And so just the ITIN is the same phrase that you'll use in both, where you were otherwise, if you were, say, a corporation or something, you'd use EIN. So that's your substitute. And pay no mind to the dash breaks in the field because we're asking you for the numbers and we'll do the translation on the back end. Next question is, what are they looking for on bank statements? I mean, purchases, personal bank account, even though I had an EIN, I was still new to owning a business, simply use a second personal account. So what we're looking for here is evidence that you have a banking account they were using for your business. So if you had a personal account that is where you were transacting your business from, parenthetically, we don't recommend that for a lot of different reasons, but brand new businesses just getting started, totally get it. You'll need to then provide that bank statement in 2020 between April and December, as we suggested, as an upload, and then again in the most recent bank statement for 2021. And then in that text box, explain that this is my personal bank statement, but this is where I was recording business expenses and business revenues, and highlight for us which of the items you would point us to reflect that, so we have the evidence that we need. The loan qualified for is $18,000. How do you round up to the nearest 5,000? Okay, so most importantly, it's not a loan, it's a grant, so you don't have to pay it back. That's good news. If you are eligible for, based on that 2 months of losses math, for $18,000, then it'll depend on whether that eligibility was before you did the roundup or not. So I think likely you'll be eligible for $20,000, but we'll work that through as we see like how the math plays out between your 2018 taxes and 2020 taxes, divide by 6, and then round up to the nearest 5,000. So probably my guess is that would be a $20,000 grant, but we'll see. All right, next question. Does your company process standard SBA loans like 7A loans? Yes and no. So we do SBA lending. This is now not grants. I'm moving over to loans for a moment for this question. We do SBA micro lending, which gives us much more flexibility than 7A loans typically do, but it is a form of a 7A loan in a different way. It's sort of SBA money, but slightly different. And so again, our loans are between $500 and $100,000. And that means that we use much simpler criteria typically and much simpler processing than a typical 7A loan would require. So we are an SBA lender, but in a slightly different way than your average bank-driven SBA lender. All right, let's see. Next question. The last question that I see. I'm going to make sure of that. Okay. Oh, sorry. I see two more in here, and then I'll ask our friends at BACP if you see any others that I may have missed. So first, can a business start in 2020 and still apply for a loan? Absolutely, yes. Does business income determine the grant amount? So again, yes, the grant amount is calculated in the difference between the income from 2019, which is your pre-pandemic revenues, and 2020, which is the pandemic revenues. So the revenues within the pandemic, we're looking for the difference between those in order to calculate a loss. So as long as you have at least $5,000 loss, we'll use that and do the math on that basis. Last question that I see here is, do you elaborate more on the type of information for independent contractor? Yeah, I think there's a very specific case that Hortensia puts in here, and I think it's going to really be case by case basis. I wish I could provide a little more detail than that, but the reason for that is that independent contractors tend to, in our experience in working with lots and lots and lots of them, file their taxes in a number of different manners, just depending on whether it's kind of a small side hustle or it's a really big part of the revenue that somebody generates or somewhere in between. And so if in your 2019 taxes you filed, say, self-proprietor Schedule C, that's easy. We can definitely handle that because that's business revenue very clearly. If you filed just a personal return and you didn't make any distinction for the receipts, the revenues that you have as a person between what you would have earned as a sort of a business person and would have earned as an employee of some other organization, that's where it gets very hard. And I think in that case, I'm not sure. It'll totally depend on the individual case. Okay. Oh, and a question, are we eligible for ERC? For the employee retention credit, I honestly don't know the answer to that. So there's a lot of specifics to go into whether the employee retention credit, particularly within the CARES Act, is something that is something you'd be eligible for or not. I will say definitively that if you happen to have received an employee retention credit, that has no bearing on your eligibility for the Back to Business grant. So certainly encourage you to apply anyway for the Back to Business grant. But whether or not a particular business is eligible for that credit, I can't speak to that without knowing all the specifics. And I will claim no particular expertise in that particular program in any case. A couple more have come in. If you have more than one business, can you apply for a loan in each business? So we'll split out loans and grants. If you're talking about applying for a grant, you are able, under a single ID, as a business owner, to apply for a grant for more than one business. Each EIN, each unique employer identification number, so an entity that's business structured in that way, is eligible for one grant. If you're a business owner that has more than one EIN, more than one independent business, you can apply for multiple businesses. The overall maximum you're able to get for any business is $150,000. The overall maximum combination of all businesses is $300,000. So if you happen to own 10 businesses, you can't have like $150,000 times 10, but you absolutely can, and we encourage you to apply more than once if you have more than one independent business. All right, I'm looking to see if any others have come in. A few more, okay. So question here is, if the business is an LLC, does the application place under the name of the business? Yeah, so the application should always be applied for by the business owner, but the name of the business will be under the business name. And you saw on the Back to Business grant application form the distinction in the two places where we capture business owner information and business information. Same thing applies when you're applying for a loan. That experience that I just showed you on the Back to Business grant will look very similar because we're using the same platform for both grants and loans here at Allies for Community Business. And we will again ask in the loan context, same thing. We'll be asking about the business owner and also the business. So information required on both. Is this loan provided by the government or private corporations? Who will own the loan, how far out, and so forth? So these are questions specifically about lending, as I see them. So the loans that we do, I want to draw this distinction very clearly. The loans that we do are loans that Allies for Community Business, as a nonprofit community development financial institution, we are lending on behalf of ourselves, and therefore people are repaying us as a nonprofit. So that's on the lending side. On the grant side, we're serving as a fiscal administrator on behalf of the state of Illinois. So the state sets the criteria, the state makes the final decisions. We're doing the legwork to set up the application, to execute the application, evaluate the applications, and so forth. But the state is the arbiter in that case. Very different between the two. And thank you for that question to make sure we're distinguishing between the two. On the lending side, where Allies is the lender and you're repaying us over the course of time, we are the lender, we own the loan. And so those payments, then, to answer your final question, will go average of 2 years, but we can go longer than that depending on what you're trying to do in the size of the loan. We do have a number of, say, 5-year loans, just depends. But all those payments come directly to us in repayment of the loan. Okay, so next, there's a question about loans again. How does your interest rate compare with standard bank rates? That's a good question. So it's a difficult comparison to make because anybody who applies for a bank loan and can secure a bank loan, we want them to do that. Those bank loans are typically going to be less expensive and establishes you in a mainstream financial institution for the long term for you to continue to grow your business. The loans that we make are focused on those entrepreneurs who cannot get a mainstream bank loan. And therefore, what we're trying to do is fill a gap where banks will very, very rarely make loans less than $100,000 to businesses. And so that's the space that we operate in. If you can, again, like get a bank loan, it'll be roughly similar in interest rate to what we charge at the moment, probably a little higher actually. But you should absolutely get that because it sets you up for long-term growth with that bank, as long as you repay successfully, which of course all of you will. But we're going to fill in the gap for those who cannot get bank financing. So the comparison is basically 3% compared to nothing. All right, so let's see if any others have come in. Yeah, I'll repeat really quickly because there's a question about what the grant funds can be used for. There is very little limitation on how you can use grant funds if you receive them through the Back to Business program, so long as they're used for business purposes. It's very different than some of the previous grant programs, which were very precise about how you can use proceeds. Picture program loan and many others told you what to use the money for, and this is not true in this case. Can you apply for grant if you did not file taxes? Unfortunately, no. So this is only for businesses that have taxes that they have filed with the federal government because it's a federal program. How long should the business be operating in order to apply for loan or grant? And so you have to have started your business in December of 2019 or earlier for the grant, for the Back to Business grant. If you're applying for a loan, that's not relevant. We fund startups, we find businesses been in operation for 20 years. It just depends on you as a business owner and your good habits, which we're evaluating. And then if you have been in business for a while, how the business has performed over time. But the constraint is not there on the lending side to have started December 19th or earlier as it is on the grant side. What if you have not filed your 2020 taxes yet? So good question. For the purposes of the Back to Business grant, we need to have 2020 taxes in order to compare your 2019 to 2020 taxes. So because the IRS has granted a long-running extension for everyone to be able to file their taxes, that's part of the reason why the grant application is open for so long. I would encourage you to file as soon as you can for 2020 if you want to apply for the Back to Business grant, because we are evaluating applications on a rolling basis, even though we're doing it in priority order rather than just first come, first serve. The lending side is similar, in which we're going to look at the documentation that you can provide for us. It's a stronger case for us if you've got a 2020 tax return, because obviously the numbers are far more recent. We'll ask for substitution documents if you haven't filed yet. But all in, I think to apply for any grant or loan dollars, having your 2020 taxes filed is going to be very helpful for you. Okay. Bottom, see if there's anything I haven't hit yet. If I have a business under my name, do I apply for myself separate and also apply for my business? So it'll essentially be both, where you're applying as a business owner on behalf of a business, and we'll be asking you for business information and business owner information. So in that way, I think it's all of the above, really, it's both. All right, so got one more list to check, see if anything else has come in here in the Q&As. For all of those. All right, so I'm gonna go back to the chat list and see if there's anything over here that I haven't covered yet. All right, so can the grant be used to improve business operations expansion? Yes, very flexibly. An accountant is working on correcting taxes currently, should the company still apply? I would highly recommend that you file the taxes as corrected in 2020 and then share with us that filing, because that'll mean that we're getting the accurate information in order to do the math properly. Are there grants loans available for a chamber of commerce that became non-operational pre-COVID? So as long as the chamber of commerce was in operation 2019 and did not dissolve and intends to restart its operations in 2021, perhaps with the help of this grant, then if you provide us with all of that documentation as we discussed throughout the webinar, then yes, you are eligible. Jamie asks, what is the interest rate on the loan program after 2021? So generally, our interest rates are 9% interest with 1% closing costs. And we're priced that way to be a little higher than what banks would typically charge for those who can get bank lending. It's typically in the order of like 6% or something like that, but far less than the average credit card interest rate, which at the moment is roughly 16%. So we charge at 9% in normal times. I will say that as a nonprofit, we price that way, knowing good and well that we will lose money on every single loan because we have to reserve against that 11.5% given all the risks that we take. That's fine. Like, that's my job to go raise the philanthropy and recover that. But 9% is our normal rate, even though it's underpriced in order for us to break even, that's okay. But we're charging 3% for the rest of this year, again, just as a reflection of the fact that it's still an emergency. We need to act like it. And so I just got to raise even more philanthropy to cover that and make sure that we as a nonprofit break even for the year. My business taxes flow to my personal taxes. Would my K-1 be used as a basis of qualification? Probably. So I think the idea here then is that you need to just provide us with whatever you filed for your business, and then we'll take that documentation that you provide us, that you provide similarly to the federal government in 2019 and 2020. We'll do the math on that basis. Does your organization assist businesses with tax filings? Good question. So we are not a tax preparation organization. However, we do make sure that people are filing with us for the purpose of applying for a grant or a loan, the tax filings that we need in order to assess your eligibility. There's two different things. So filing to the IRS, that is registered accountants, tax prep providers. That's the place to go for that. And we don't do that, but do help you make sure those taxes are then useful for you for the purpose of applying for grants and loans. The community navigator list that's just before, which are all listed on the Back to Business homepage, that lists a number of organizations who provide tax preparation services. So I would suggest that you go to that list and then search for tax preparation and see which of those organizations can help you with that if you need. All right, so that's all I saw in the chat. Back to the Q&A, see if there's any left in here. Can grants and loans be available for startups? Loans, yes. This particular grant, Back to Business, no. And so I encourage you on that question to apply for the loans we described before. Will the replay be available? I will defer to BACP on that once we finish. And can a nonprofit apply for both grants and loans? Yes. Oh, last question. How long is the process for applying for a grant and actually receiving the funds? So I touched upon this earlier, but to make sure everybody heard it, this is a rolling process. So once somebody applies and finishes an application with all the uploaded documents inclusive, we will then immediately that day do a sorting based on the prioritization that that application has earned in a row of 1 to 32, depending on all the criteria we talked about before. Those that are in the high priority buckets are going to get evaluated essentially within 24 to 48 hours. Those that are in relatively lower prioritization buckets, it'll just depend on how many very high priority applications we receive that we haven't gotten to yet, because we're going to get through all of those high priority ones first, then move to the next set of priorities immediately thereafter based on when those applications came in. So while I can't estimate, because of all of that, exactly how long it will take between application and decision, and between decision and funding, I will say that funds will begin to go out middle of September. The application closes in the middle of October, and we seek to have all the funds distributed on or around the end of October. All right. So I think that's it. I'm going to end with a very good ending with the last question that I see here, and that is, what's the link again? Good call. So a4cb.org is our website, Osford Community Business website. And then you'll see right on the homepage a way to get to loans and grants. And when you see that, there's a loans page and there's a grants page. It's a4cb.org/loans, a4cb.org/grants. And depending on which you're looking to apply for, that'll then take you to where you need to go. So with that, I think we're through all the questions. Really appreciate everybody's time here. I'm going to turn it back over to BACP for the closing to talk about how to access the recording and anything else. BACP.
Thank you, Brad, for this wonderful webinar. I hope that all of our attendees were able to get the much needed information. If you are a part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, please send us an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. Again, that email is bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. If you want to learn more about this program, please visit chicago.gov/business education. Again, that's chicago.gov/business education. This webinar will be posted hopefully by Friday, the latest Monday, on the Chicago BACP YouTube page. You can see this and all of our webinars on the Chicago BACP YouTube page. For more of our upcoming webinars, please visit chicago.gov/business education. Again, thank you, Brad, and thanks to all of our attendees. And you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your time, and thank you for running great businesses in our communities.